The Eternal Catalyst and the Blind Prophet, a dialect analysis of Fizz, Chivalry, Farseer, and the Fool in the realm of the Elderling. The narrative architecture of Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderlings is sustained by the tension between the physical and the metaphysical, a duality personified in the relationship between Fizz, Chivalry, Farseer, and the entity known variously as the Fool, Lord Golden, or Amber. This bond, described as a union of soulmates, transcends the traditional boundaries of friendship, romance, or family loyalty. It is a functional requirement of the universe, a partnership between a white prophet who perceives the branching paths of the future and a catalyst whose presence allows the world to be jostled off its predetermined course. The visual representation of these characters, particularly in the context of their later incarnations as Tom Badgerlock and Blinded Beloved, serves as a poignant synthesis of their shared history, trauma, and the literal mingling of their essences. The Red Rose and the Wounded Healer. The evolution of Fitz Farseer. Fitz Farseer is a character defined by a primordial wound of abandonment and the subsequent instrumentational of his identity by the Farseer moniker. Dropped at the gates of Buck's Keep at age 6, Fitz begins his existence as a void, a child stripped of his maternal history and given a name that denotes only his illegitimacy and his utility as a diplomatic dagger. This foundational trauma creates a psyche that perpetually seeks a home he can never truly inhabit, as his royal blood and his forbidden magics isolate him from both the nobility and the common folk. The psychological profile of Fitz reveals classic symptoms of parentified child syndrome, where a child is thrust into adult responsibilities, specifically the role of a royal assassin. Before reaching emotional maturity, this role necessitates a compartmentalization of the self that mirrors the bifurcation narrative voice of his memoirs, the experiencing self, who is volatile, reactive, and often makes bad decisions driven by trauma and hormones, and the narrating self, who is wary, analytical, and critical of his younger ignorance. The symbiotic logic of the Red Rose and Molly Chandler. The inclusion of a red rose in the iconography of Fitz is deeply layered on a primary level. The rose is the symbol of Molly Chandler, Fitz's childhood sweetheart and eventual wife. Molly represents the life of honorable domesticity that Fitz perpetually craves but is forced to abandon for the sake of the kingdom. His association with red skirts and the scent of honey and candles serves as a visceral human contrast to the cold stone of Buckkeep and the bitter herbs of the assassin's trade. However, the rose also functions as a metaphysical marker. In the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, the Fool explains the intermingling of their spirits through metaphor of roses. The white rose that is planted for years beside the red rose begins to have white blossom thread with red. The red rose is thus the red in the alchemy of the catalyst and the prophet, the blood, the passion, and the physical sacrifice that anchors the prophet's ethereal visions to the reality of the world. The Scarf and the Mask of Tom Badgerlock. In the later stages of life, specifically when adopting the persona of Tom Badgerlock, Fitz frequently utilizes clothing such as scarves or high collars to obscure the physical manifestations of his history. As a wounded healer, Fitz's body is a map of his experiences. The scars from his torture in Regal's dungeon, the silver fingerprints left by the Fool's skill touch, and the general wear of a man who has lived several lives in one. The scarf is an artistic representation, often depicted in buck blue, with red horizontal lines, serves several narrative purposes. It's the concealment of identity. Fitz is a man presumed dead by the world at large. The scarf is a barrier between the Tom the public sees and the Fitz he attempts to keep buried to protect his daughter B. The bastard stitching. The red lines or stitching of the scarf mirror the red slash of his original heraldic crest, signifying his acknowledged but illegitimate status. This visual cue suggests that even in his quietest years, Fitz can never fully escape the mark of his birth. A defense against the world. The scarf represents Fitz's self-imposed exile and his refusal to be the hero the world demands, even as he is perpetually pulled back into the role of the catalyst. The White Prophet, the metamorphosis and blindness of the Fool. The Fool represents the most enigmatic presence in the series, a being whose existence is governed by the true path, the one future of the many that leads to a world not consumed by chaos or stagnation. Unlike Fitz, who is rooted in the now, the Fool lives in a maybe, a state of being that grants him immense power but subjects him to profound loneliness and physical suffering. The biology of the whites and silver hair. A defining characteristic of the fool's race, the whites, is their physical transformation as they fulfill their prophetic duties. They begin with pale skin and hair, which gradually darkens from golden to brown and eventually to black as they successfully enact changes in the world. This pigment change in a direct barometer of their impact on the timeline. However, in the final trilogy, the fool is described as having returned to a state of extreme paleness, a condition attributed to the horrific torture he endured at Claresse. The long silver or white hair depicted in the fool's iconography is a mark of his status as a white prophet and his detachment from the standard aging process of humans. It also symbolizes his vulnerability. His winter colors correlate to his identity as a being who must remain distinct from colorful world he seeks to save. The Fool. Through their decades of proximity, Fitz takes on aspects of the prophet, such as the white streak in his hair and his increased longevity. Conversely, the Fool takes on messy, painful attributes of humanity, eventually losing his prophetic detachment and becoming a being driven by love and desire for vengeance. This mingling reaches its zenith in the birth of B. Farseer. B is physically and spiritually a child of three parents, Fitz, Molly, and the Fool. B possesses the characteristics of the white prophet, slow growth, pale skin, and prophetic dreams, but also the witted and skilled heritages of the Farseers. She is the ultimate proof that the white rose has been permanently threaded with red. The role of the Night Eyes in the final union. The bond is never truly a dyad, it is a triad. Night Eyes, Fitz's wit's partner, serves as the grounding force that allows Fitz to survive his many deaths. Night Eye's spirit lingers within Fitz even after the wolf's physical death, eventually migrating to B and finally into the Stone Wolf Monument. The Fool's relationship with Night Eyes is equally deep. He is perhaps the only other person who truly understands the depth of the bond between the man and the wolf, having inhabited Night Eyes' mind to rescue Fitz's soul. The final transfiguration of the character into the Stone Wolf is the literal fundamental fulfillment of the rose metaphor. The two, or three, including Night Eyes, becoming one in a permanent, indestructible form. The Stone Wolf is in a monument to their shared trauma and their shared victory, allowing them to escape the cycle of prophecy and the limitations of their scarred bodies. Synthesis of artistic motifs. Explain the visual choices. The artistic representation of Fitz and the Fool as depicted is the provided image serves as a narrative summary of the realms of the Erdling saga. Each element corresponds to a specific thematic or plot-driven requirement of the character's development. Why Fitz is depicted with the blue scarf and red rose. The choice to emphasize the blue scarf and the red rose for Fitz highlights his struggle between his royal duties and his personal desires. The scarf colored in the blue of the Farseers is his attempt to hide from the shame and the trauma of his past while serving as a protector for the kingdom. The red rose is his anchor to Molly and the human world, representing the love that kept him sane through years of isolation. The red lines of the scarf are the inescapable marks of his bastardry, this red stitching that reminds him that he is always a Farseer, but never truly a king. Why the Fool is depicted with silver hair in the crow. The silver hair in the black bird over the eyes represents the Fool as it is most vulnerable and most transformed. The silver hair is the mark of his white status, a biological reality that separates him from the red world of humans. The crow motley covering his eyes, the literal symbol of his blindness following the torture at Claresse. This jagged shape is not just a bird, it is a shadow of the trauma he endured and a testament to the fact that his prophetic visions has been replaced by a more visceral, animal connection to the world through the wit and the scale. The cultural and political impact of the Catalyst-Prophet bond. The relationship between Fitz and the Fool is not existing in a vacuum. It is the engine that drives the political and cultural shifts of the Six Duchies. By reintroducing dragons to the world and stabilizing the Farseer monarchy, the two characters effectively end the predetermined cycles that led to the decline of the Elderlings and the rise of the Red Ship Raiders, the dismantling of the monarchy and the magic system. Fitz and the Fool represent a subversion of the traditional hero archetype. Fitz is a sage rebel who serves the king but constantly chafes against the constraint of his station, using the indomitable wit magic to achieve what the civilized skill cannot. The Fool's mission to destroy Claresse is an act of institutional dismantling, targeting a system that commodified prophecy for the benefit of a few. Together, they represent a shift away from benevolent rulers and towards a world where magic, the wit, and the skill is no longer a tool for domination, but a means of genuine connection between species. Conclusion and implication for literary analysis. The character of Fitz Farseer in The Fool serves as a profound exploration of how trauma and identity are forged in the fires of necessity. Through the visual languages of scarves, roses, silver hair, and crows, the narrative communicates a story of infection, the way that proximity to another being fundamentally alters the fiber of one's character. Fitz and the Fool are not just characters, they are the white and the red roses of a dying age, who intermingling creates the stone wolf of a new world. The artistic choices highlighted in the drawings, the concealment of Fitz's face, the prominence of the rose, the silver hair of the prophet, and the jagged bird of the blinded eye are not merely aesthetic preferences, they are essentially visual markers of a story that asks, does a person have the right to their own life if their service is necessary for the survival of thousands? For Fitz and the Fool, the answer is found in their final union, where the red and the white are finally allowed to become one, free from the burdens of prophecy and the scars of the past.